Hey everyone, my name is Randy Lee and I'm an environmental engineer. I'm wearing glasses now because I can't really see that well because I've been looking at the screen for way too long. Anyway, if you're a true believer of science, you'll know that climate change is real. Yes, the climate does change on a natural cycle spread throughout millions of years. However, it's been accelerated thanks to human intervention and mainly the burning of fossil fuels. So it's that time of the year where we're sort of meeting up with people for the holidays like Christmas and New Year's. How do we explain this to the older generation? What about the older generation that didn't really have to think about it back in their day, or they may even deny it? They could say that it's fake, or that it's not human caused, or that it's as natural as the weather. Unfortunately, it is sad to hear that, especially if it's coming from someone you love and you care about, like your grandparents. And they also don't want to get you mad, or they think that maybe you're just too young or naive, so you both just end it there and move on to another topic at the dinner table. So the question is, how do you, a younger generation, convince them that climate change is real, like it's a real threat? Obviously, you don't want to sound too pushy and cause stress or tension between the two of you. You just want them to know that it's real and that they can do something about it. It's not to point fingers and spit out facts and sound like a broken record or see who is right or wrong. The main goal here is that you want them to understand. You want them to realize that they can do something about it, even at their age. Because in the end, what's good if you know something but you don't apply it? Realizing and understanding that there is a problem to begin with is the first part to fixing a solution. So in this video, here are the best ways to convince people. That way you can at least start off the new year doing something right. And the first one on the list is try to understand it from their perspective. I know it's a lot easier said than done, and you might be wondering, why can't the older people see it from my perspective then? I can't answer that for you because I'm not one of them. But since you're the mature one here trying to persuade them, you have to be the one to change your mindset and see it from their perspective. So imagine if you were in their shoes. Okay, so now you're like a 6-year-old grandparent. They're much older than you, and they don't have that much time to live on this earth anymore. So they may not be worried about climate change. I mean, why would you have to worry about it if you only have like a few decades left to live on this world? Just leave the problems to some other generation. You got other things to worry about, or other important things to do with however many years you have left. Even if they do believe in climate change, they just don't have the time to think about problems. So they probably are just going to enjoy the years that they have left. What? Plastic will outnumber the amount of weight of fish in the ocean by 2050? Might as well eat more fish now while I'm still alive. Actually, I hate that kind of thinking because that selfishly says you're going to take more resources from an already limited supply and let others fend for it themselves in the future. Anyway, back to my point. Convince them by seeing it from their point of view. Get in their heads, see why they think that way, and once you understand them, then try to approach climate change from a different angle. One where they're willing to listen from. The next tip is, ask questions instead of telling facts. Don't start the conversation by spitting out facts. Don't be like, according to this research paper published by the journal Nature, blah blah blah. Obviously, no one cares about that. Seriously, even though I don't want to discredit the people who work so hard on doing that research paper, more than likely your grandparents don't know anyone from NASA or just aren't spending their free time reading heavy, intense research papers. Yes, you should have the facts as reference for if they ever ask or if you want that to support yourself, but it's something that not every common average person does on their free time. Once you start making declarative or demanding statements, like according to XYZ paper, that in a way deactivates their brain. They're just not going to listen to you anymore. But once you start asking questions, now you're hoping for a response back from them. Now they get to have their own say in climate change, and they are allowed to voice their opinions. In fact, you're requesting for their opinion when you ask a question because you want to hear from their point of view. So for example, instead of bringing up a study found that by the year 2050, there'll be more plastic in the ocean than there will be fish in the ocean, ask your grandpa, who just so happens to love fishing, hey grandpa, what do you think would happen if the fish you caught tomorrow has some plastic in his stomach? Would you still eat the fish? Now that's a deep question. Now he's curious, and he might be thinking, why would there be plastic in my fish? Once he has that puzzled and serious look in his face, now you know you got him hooked. Third on the list is understand that times were different back then. Yeah, here comes the back in my day phase. Times have and will always be different for each generation. Back in their day, EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, might have just been created back in 1970. Back in their day, Silent Spring, which is the world famous environmental science book that documented the use of pesticides, was published in 1962, meaning the damage was just discovered and being published for the public to know. Meanwhile, today, the consequences of the damage have already completed its effect. What I'm saying is, back in their day, the effects of environmental discoveries were very early, And now, like 50 years later, the damages of those discoveries are taking effect or have already completed its process. So for example, the ice caps 50 years ago weren't as badly diminished as they are today. So this sort of ties back into the first point, which is see it from their perspective. I know you're mostly worried because you're young and you want to live like a long, good life, but you just don't know if climate change might get you first before you reach your 60s. Fourth on the list is accept that they might have received misinformation. With today's technology and having the internet easily accessible, it's so easy to search things up and get information from anywhere. That being said, it's not always right. From flat earthers to climate change deniers, there are so many things that you and me might see as common sense or just downright impossible to refute. But there are some people out there who still believe in it. Normally the first thing people hear is usually the first thing they'd believe. If they have no background information on it whatsoever, it's hard to unlearn something if it's the first thing that you were taught. So just from my personal experience, older people use Facebook more so as their main social media platform than most other platforms. That's where they read the news, that's where they catch up on the latest gossip from their friends, and that's where they usually get their information. Honestly, they might even be more skeptical if they hear it on TV than compared to what their friends say. Whether it just be that one random ad that they saw while scrolling to their newsfeed, or they heard it from their friends from high school who just so happens to be like an avid climate change denier, they will probably believe that friend more so than they have some news article, especially if they don't have any previous background on that information. If, for example, one of your grandparents' close friends doesn't believe in climate change, more than likely your grandparents won't believe in it too, because that's what friends are for. And who can say no to their close friends? Unless your grandparents have a very scientific background or have done their due diligence in the world of science and researching what climate change is, which, let's be honest, isn't really the case, and are willing to block or unfriend their high school friend who happens to be a climate change denier, your grandparents aren't going to budge from their stance if that's what their friends say. They trust their friend, who may or may not be correct in terms of information, more so than some random news anchor or whatever they see on TV. And the last tip is that money and politics have influenced the validity of climate change. Here's the sad reality. Scientists can be paid to skew data or phrase words to make it so that certain rich companies can continue to pollute and worsen climate change. It happens. And for that example, those aren't true scientists who want to present unbiased data. Rather, they're just greedy people who just share misguided information for their own benefit. So if you hear from a very well-known scientist or a politician downplaying the realities of climate change, it could probably be because they're paid to do so. They could have gotten hundreds of thousands or even millions to say it to the public. But they know that deep down, climate change is real, that it's a threat, and that it can affect millions of people in the future. But why does it matter to them if it hurts other people? It's not hurting them, the person who, announced that. They might have received those millions of dollars from certain lobbyists or companies, and they can use that money to afford to protect themselves from when climate change does hit. It's just some people are more adept with more resources to protect themselves and pay for the damages for when climate change does hit everyone. If a low-income family lost their home due to climate change, for example, they can't afford to buy another one. But if a millionaire politician lost his home, they could probably just use that money to buy another one. They can get paid to say climate change isn't real again, get paid a few millions, and then just repeat the whole process again and again. So you can see where this process breaks the trust in people, especially skeptical older generations. We see it happening, and we know it does happen, whether you like it or not. We just have to do our own due diligence, use that information to better protect ourselves, and plan for our own well-being rather than think that some politician or scientist will come save us all. And so those are the 5 best tips I can give you on how to convince an older person or a climate change denier into believing in climate change. I personally believe that climate change can be lessened down to a local and individual decision-making level. And all of that begins with your family and how you're able to influence and interact with them. Going from grocery shopping to reducing your reliance on certain fossil fuels or plastics. If you can get them on board, we're one step closer to collectively battling against climate change. Alright, so that's all I have for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Enjoy your holidays. Happy New Year. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.